A leader in the Deliotte Saskatoon office with a focus on food and agriculture. Born into a grain farming family here in Saskatchewan where my brothers continue the family farming tradition.
I'm Beaudry, and my family moved to Saskatchewan back when I was in grade 4. This has been my home since that time. It's a place where I have had incredible opportunities professionally and personally.
And now fortunate to be with Deliotte in food and agribusiness.
Deliotte has been in this province for a long period of time.
We've been here basically from the start. It feels good to know we've been in the province and part of the local community for over 100 years.
We have a practice that has an incredibly wide and deep bench across human capital, across financial advisory, across digital and tech, so we can bring together a holistic approach to some of the major challenges that the world and Saskatchewan are trying to face. Saskatchewan can lead the way in terms of protecting our agricultural sector with respect to cybersecurity. As we are evolving in terms of ag tech and digital farming and agricultural platforms, we have the opportunity to build in cybersecurity at the front end. What we don't want to see is to have our cybersecurity framework regulated from outside of the sector. What we do want to see is farmers and producers and local governments coming up with ways to make sure our data is secure with that common sense approach that Saskatchewan is really known for.
Here in Saskatchewan, we're fortunate to have many sectors that are doing really well. We have the food, the fuel, and the fertilizer the world needs right now. In 2023, we had exports of $49 billion, and of those, $35 billion were related to food, fuel, and fertilizer. Part of purpose at Deliotte is to make an impact that matters. And what we're doing with food and fertilizer here in the province, we're helping to feed the world. And through what we're doing with carbon-free nuclear energy here in the province, we're helping with the energy transition around the world.
Saskatchewan has always been innovative, but what we can do today is to leverage the ecosystem that is already in place to really amplify that and solve some of the world's biggest challenges.
Good morning and welcome to the Launchpad presented by Deliotte. On now, the Saskatchewan Budget 2025, Impacts and Insights for Agriculture. Please welcome Bill Greuel, Deputy Minister, Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture. Bill Prybylski, President, Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan. And Tina Beaudry, partner with Deliotte, the panel moderator.
Good morning, Canada Farm Show friends. How's everyone this morning? All right, thank you. There's a few people that have had coffee already. That's great. So there's no politics to talk about right now. There's nothing to talk about with respect to trades or tariffs or any of those things, but just kidding. I'm joined today. This is going to be a bit of a challenge from a moderator perspective because I'm joined by Bill and Bill. So they're just going to have to figure out whoever I'm pointing to, I guess, is going to respond to the question. But I'm looking forward to a really great discussion today. I'm with a lot of breadth of knowledge here on the stage. So maybe Bill, if you would start with a bit of an introduction of yourself, and then other Bill, if you would also do the same.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. It's great to be here. My name, for those of you who've not met me, is Bill Greuel. I'm Deputy Minister of Agriculture here in the province of Saskatchewan. I grew up on a mixed grain and livestock farm about an hour down east of here on Highway 5, and just looking forward to the conversation and breaking down a little bit of the great agriculture budget that we announced yesterday.
Yeah.
Morning, and thanks a lot. My name is Bill Prybylski. I am the president of APAS, the Agriculture Producers Association of Saskatchewan, but APAS is much easier to spit out, so we'll go with that. I farm with some family members. We run a mixed farming operation near Yorkton, Saskatchewan.
Okay, so I think Bill is going to take us through some of the highlights of the provincial budget yesterday, particularly with respect to agriculture.
Great, thanks, Tina. It feels like maybe budget was exciting news yesterday, and maybe not so much today because everybody's heard it. But I do want to talk a little bit about agriculture budget that we announced yesterday that Minister Reiter tabled in the legislature yesterday. We had a stakeholder session. It was great to have a number of our agriculture stakeholders represented here in Regina for the breakdown of the budget. You know, we've got to acknowledge some of the challenges and issues facing the agriculture sector today in terms of tariffs and the uncertainty. But I think what we've tabled as a budget yesterday, you know, maybe doesn't directly contemplate support for tariffs, but I think when you heard Minister Ryder talk about the reasons behind why that is, it makes sense. And I think what we've tabled yesterday is a very strong budget in support of the agriculture sector. I'll maybe touch a little bit as the backdrop in terms of what guides the development of the provincial agriculture budget, and it's certainly Saskatchewan's growth plan and the 2030 goals that we have for growing of the sector. One of the targets that we've created for the government of Saskatchewan in the agriculture sector is increasing the value-added agriculture economic output in the province to $10 billion by 2030, and we're on track to meet that. And our sector is one of the fastest growing value-added sectors in Canada, doubling since 2012 from $3.5 billion to $7.9 billion. And we're on track to meet that as well. We're also on track to meet our growth plan goal of 45 million metric tons of crop production on an annual basis. And it's really a testament to, I think, some of the technology and innovation that you see here at Canada's Farm Show and the innovation that farmers have. And I think about last production year when we had some dry conditions in July, and we still managed to table a crop that was north of 35 million metric tons, which was about a 4% increase over the 5-year average. So that's really a testament to agriculture and what it is that we've done in terms of research and innovation. There we go. I'm hitting the wrong button. So our budget for let me go back here, sorry. So this year, agriculture received an increased funding of about $54.5 million, which I think clearly demonstrates the province's commitment to the growth of this sector. Total budget for 25-26 is a record $625 million, and I'll break that down. And with the budget, we really continue to deliver on the programs and services that producers need while taking the time to invest in the long-term success of the industry. And I'll break that down. I think the biggest part of the agriculture budget, if you're familiar with it, is certainly our ability to fully fund and support the business risk program and crop insurance premiums. And we're also looking to the future to continuing to invest in irrigation and crop production. Maybe just touching on the overall themes of the provincial budget that you've heard. In agriculture, we often get focused on the big ticket item for us, which is fully funding business risk management, but I think this budget also aligns with what we've talked about as a provincial government in terms of the priorities of affordability, healthcare, education, safer communities, and fiscal responsibilities. I think we're all of the belief in the agriculture sector that if we have a strong agriculture sector, that helps the province deliver on these other additional priorities. So as I mentioned, the agriculture budget's a record $625 million. That's an increase of $54.6 million. And that includes $483 million to continue funding the strong existing suite of business risk management programs, which is crop insurance and agri-stability, offered in partnership with Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation. We're also entering the third year of delivering our strategic programming under the Federal Provincial Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, which is SCAP. That's an $89.4 million annual investment that we cost share with the federal government. And that program supports a wide range of initiatives that cover pest biosecurity and disease surveillance, control of invasive weeds, research and development, support for value-added processing, and of course farm safety research, and that's signified by my ribbon. It is Farm Safety Week here in Saskatchewan this year. So in terms of the largest ticket items in the budget, of course, it's business risk management. You saw in the previous chart that we're delivering programming through the Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation, and really as a ministry and as government committed to supporting producers as they feed the world. The full suite of business risk management programs is really a producer's first line of defense to mitigate risk within their operations. And we reflect on 2024, a bit of a challenging year. But last year we had over 37 million acres of the province insured by crop insurance. That accounts for 86% of acres for grains and oilseeds. And crop insurance really gives producers the security they need when facing adverse growing conditions. You know, the past several years is a bit of a reminder of how important this is. Crop insurance paid out about $7 billion in claims over the last 4 years through the multi-peril insurance program. And, you know, all of that was covered by producer premiums and the crop insurance fund. We didn't have to borrow against that. And I think it speaks to how well the crop insurance program is managed and the importance that producers place on supporting the program. Saskatchewan producers, you know, one of the reasons why we've got such a great crop insurance program and we can support it is really because of producers' adoption of new technologies and production practices that lead to yield stability, influencing the crop insurance premium even in times of drought. So again, reflecting on the last couple of years when we've had some really difficult and challenging times related to weather, we had built up a crop insurance fund in the previous years and used that to pay out claims over the course of time. But the adoption of new production technologies, many of which you're seeing as you walk around the show here today, helps keep premiums low and ensures that we've got a strong business risk management program on a go-forward basis. And I know that this slide is hard to read. I think the intent is to show the depth and breadth of programming that we offer under the Sustainable CAP program, the Strategic Initiatives piece. This is a 5-year, $485 million investment by federal and provincial governments in strategic initiatives that help support a resilient and competitive agriculture sector. So that's $89.4 million that will contribute in 25-26 to the areas of that you see on the screen. Resiliency and public trust, market development, science research, and innovation. Popular programming in here that you might see is the Farm and Ranch Water Infrastructure Program, Resilient Agriculture Landscape Programs, and the Animal Health and Biosecurity Program, some of which we deliver with third parties, including a great partnership that we've had on pest biosecurity with SARM. I do want to highlight agriculture research, especially because we're sitting in the heart of innovation in production agriculture here at Canada's Farm Show. Agriculture research remains a top priority for the province. We're investing $37 million in research and development to help producers stay competitive and profitable in international markets. You know, this funding supports research projects and research partners. In the last 5 years, we've contributed $166 million to key personnel and research chairs and research projects, and we know that research is what keeps our producers on the leading edge of industry. And really a large focus on production practices that leads to sustainable crop production. You may have heard the Global Institute for Food Security. I know my colleague Steve Webb was here earlier in the week talking about some of the work that they've done, measuring the carbon intensity of the commodities that we grow, lower than any other place in the world. And I think that's a testament to the partnership between research that we're supporting in the Ministry of Agriculture and the adoption of new technologies by farmers in this province. So, I mean, in summary, I'm very pleased to acknowledge that the record budget for agriculture of $625 million, and really when I think about what it is that we've done to support the sector, I think we've really funded a combination of programs and services and research that will serve the industry as well. And we're very fortunate to be able to rely on the partners that have helped us on the development of this budget, and looking forward to the next year in delivering both the suite of business risk management programs under Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation, and also delivering on our strategic initiatives under the SCAP program. So I'll take a seat and we'll chat about the budget.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bill. And so I'm going to give Bill from APAS the opportunity to maybe respond to what you've heard from the perspective of the membership of the agricultural producers of Saskatchewan.
Sure, thanks. So, you know, going into the budget, I think what we were hoping for was a do no harm budget to make sure that we weren't getting any cuts to any of the major programs. And I think on that perspective, obviously, this budget achieves that. In fact, there is some increase in funding, which was good to see, particularly in the areas of like the BRM programming, to see that increase in funding there so that producers have those programs in place and to properly properly secure their interests going forward. The increase in research, I think, is very critical. The research funding for the, things like what we're seeing here today, as Bill mentioned, and other areas like the some funding for the College of Veterinary Medicine, which is been a big issue in the last several years. A lack of veterinary services across the province. To see some investment in those areas is certainly positive. Having said that, obviously there's there's things that we wished we would have seen. Some improvements, some enhancements to the crop insurance program, particularly in terms of the yield cushioning to help producers who are seeing successive years of poor conditions because of drought. Things like added coverage for producers that feel that they need more coverage and are to have that ability to purchase that extra insurance if they so desire. So the little things like that we would have liked to seen. And then I guess the area of the PST, something that was introduced not that long ago, was the PST on farm insurance. That was a significant increase in expense for producers. So to see areas like that addressed would have been nice to see. But overall, I think we're very pleased with the budget. It addresses some long-term issues that we see going forward, and for the most part, we would be quite happy with what we've seen.
Okay, so we are facing 100% tariff from China on canola as a result of some decisions at the federal level. We're facing some real competitiveness challenges in this sector. You've both talked about business risk management and the role of government there in supporting our industry. I wonder if you might just speak to the overall uncertainty, and I'll start with you, Bill, from APAS. That what are you hearing from your membership, and what's top of mind for them?
I think for the most part, what farmers are feeling is just a high level of uncertainty with the China tariffs to begin with it being just placed on the canola oil and the canola seed, or canola meal rather. How does that affect prices? We've seen that there's been a significant drop in prices, but is China still in the market for the seed portion of it? And just going forward, how does that affect the market? Will there be demand coming again? I think that obviously farmers are resilient. We've seen issues before with China. We've worked through them, and we'll get there again. But in the short term, how is it affecting producers' bottom line, and how do they manage that cash flow if all of a sudden we're looking at a $2 or $2.50 a bushel decline in canola prices? How do we deal with the roughly $8 billion of investment that farmers are looking at putting in the ground here in the next few weeks? How do we cash flow that in the short term? So I think for the biggest part, producers are concerned about the uncertainty going forward, the uncertainty in the short term, and how do we deal with it now and going forward.
Are you hearing a lot of the producers thinking that they will not put canola in the ground this year?
I have not. I don't believe that. There may be minor changes to some producers' seeding plans if they were kind of on the fence of whether or not to seed canola. They may step away from it. But I think, if they go away from canola, where do they go? If all of a sudden half the province is seeded to wheat, well, how does that affect our wheat prices? For a lot of producers, they like to see that cereal oilseed rotation. Well, if they're going away from canola, what is the other oilseed that we go into? Flax is an option, but flax market is a very limited market that could be easily flooded if there's just too many acres going into that. So it's pretty hard to change, to see massive changes. There may be some incremental changes, but I don't believe there will be any major changes to seeding intentions. Yeah.
Bill, do you want to respond to the competitiveness resilience?
Yeah, we only got 43 minutes left, and I think I could... I'd maybe think about this in kind of a matrix, right? Because we've got a trade disruption with our two major markets, right? And so we're talking about uncertainty. I think if I think about what's happening with China and canola trade, sure, there's uncertainty, but there's almost certainty, right? If today is D-Day for 100% tariffs on oil and meal, there is a very certain outcome if that happens. That is that we will be idling canola crush assets in this country. And I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. Our canola crush industry has talked about the quantum of seed meal that's bought by China and the US cannot be replaced through market diversification. We don't have the ability to store that on site and wait for the market to return. And so, there is unfortunately some almost certainty of what could happen in the canola industry if this does not get resolved soon. I know that we want to talk about what the federal government needs to do, so we'll come back to that because there is a way to get through this. I think the other piece is the uncertainty that we're talking about, and that's the U.S., because this is on again, off again, tariffs coming, tariffs not coming, maybe it's on this, maybe it's on that. That's what's driving uncertainty in terms of, and then the matrix for me is thinking about this from a value chain perspective, because there's producers who are thinking about seeding intentions, as Bill has described, but there's the rest of the value chain thinking about investments, and I really worry about that piece as well. You think about what's driving investment in the agriculture sector, especially in the canola crush sector. It is certainty about markets. Yeah. It's certainty about the biofuel industry in the U.S., and there's other things complicating that, not just the tariffs. And so it's really, I think, causing anxiety in terms of investment and the uncertainty piece. So, there's China, there's the U.S., and there's growers, and then there's industry. And so that whole matrix is what we have to think about when we talk about certainty and uncertainty. And, so maybe I'll just leave it at that because we can break into competitiveness, but this is underlying the competitiveness of the sector.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Bill. The province of Saskatchewan has been really aggressive on the trade file for a number of years now. And I noticed that the federal partnership also had trade as one of the key pillars of that partnership. Can you maybe talk about what the opportunities are in other markets that we really need to double down on?
Yeah, so Tina, we had the opportunity. So we've had the Premier has been to Washington. He's been to Mexico. Minister Kading, Minister of Trade and Export Development's been to Singapore, to Vietnam, down to Washington. Myself and my minister, Minister Harrison, we've been to Washington to the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. We've also been to Dubai and to India. And so yes, a huge focus on market diversification and trade diversification for the province of Saskatchewan. That's critically important, but I think we all have to be realistic that the canola issue in China is not going to be solved through market diversification. Yep. Short term, maybe even long term. So the U.S. is a $26 trillion economy. China takes, millions of metric tons of canola meal to feed the livestock sector. Those are markets that we can't replace. And so, yes, critically important that we're out doing trade diversification. We cannot take our foot off the gas on that, but we also have to be realistic about the quantum of problems that we can solve by doing that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I completely agree, and I am very worried, obviously, about the canola crush facilities and the impact that will have, particularly in the Regina and surrounding area community, because we need those anchor tenants in order to bring up the whole ecosystem, right? It's really critically important, and we as a country tend to export our raw materials to be value-added processed to other places, even though I would acknowledge that in your opening comments you talked about how we've really grown that sector across the ag space. Manitoba's going to unveil their budget today. Alberta has already unveiled their budget. We'll see what Manitoba does today, but we do know that Alberta has built in a bit of a contingency in theirs. There's been a little bit of chatter about that. Maybe, Bill, from APAS, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts about contingency and the overall, resilience of the budget plan, especially when we're talking about business risk management and how important it is to the sector?
So I think the existing business risk management programs as they exist today are somewhat designed to help producers in the long run, and to ensure that they're there in the long term. What we're dealing with now is kind of a very immediate situation. So we would probably be looking for for some indication from the government, and I think they've done a good job of that to this point, to suggest that they will be there for farmers when we need them. It's pretty hard to, and I understand the provincial government's position. It's pretty hard to design a program when we really don't know what we're designing it to offset. Is the China issue going to be long term? Is it just short term? Is the federal government going to step in and realize that this is hurting an industry that we can't afford to lose, and they take measures that will help to alleviate the issue there, and the U.S. tariffs, which are still absolutely up in the air. We have no idea where it's going to land. So to develop a program that's going to cover all the issues that we don't even know what those issues are yet is somewhat like shooting in the dark. So we understand the provincial government's position from that perspective. On the other hand, I think what producers are looking for is just the recognition from the provincial government that this is an issue that's going to be there's going to be some big hurt at the farm gate if canola prices continue to decline as we've seen in the past few days here. Will there be a rebound in the market once things kind of figure out where we are, and if there is some movement in other areas? So I think what we're looking for is just some reassurance from our provincial government that they will be there, working with producers to find out exactly what the effects are, and that they will be there to support producers when the time comes.
You want to respond to that, Bill?
I do, because I actually think, I agree with you, Bill. But I would think what would serve the farmers of Saskatchewan a lot better than provincial recognition is federal recognition of why these tariffs are in place in China, right? And we all know why you guys are going to suffer. It's because there's 100% tariffs on electric vehicles from China. And so, until the federal government makes that recognition and makes that connection, we can recognize the issues and challenges all day long, which I think we have, but that's the heart of the issue.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get to the federal piece of it shortly. But before we do, given that you're going to have other provincial budgets levied, that you've had Alberta, you're going to have Manitoba today, everyone's talking about interprovincial trade barriers and how we work better as a country internally. Some of that is supply chain and logistics, obviously. Manitoba did make a fairly significant announcement in the inland port in Churchill. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, I guess you should never let a crisis go to waste to some respect, and maybe there's opportunities for us to do things better internally in Canada across provinces than perhaps that we've done before. And I'd invite either of you to maybe kick us off.
Yeah, no doubt that there's those interprovincial trade barriers just seem to be just a no-brainer, that we have to do something to deal with those. Obviously the canola issue isn't necessarily affected too much by interprovincial trade barriers, but there's so many other little things like trucking regulations that are different from province to province that affect the ability to move our products within Canada. If we talk about the beef industry, I think there's some very significant trade barriers there that are not allowing that free movement of beef from one province to the next. So there's certainly things that in my opinion need to be addressed. Not only that should be, but they need to be addressed in the short term to help producers to develop markets so that we are that much less reliant on our two big trading partners, and even if it's just small incremental things. I think now is the time that the governments across the country need to step up and recognize those areas where they can make improvements.
And maybe before we go to Bill, I know you have a big summit coming up with many of the industry associations. How closely are you working across provinces to make sure that you come together with a bit of a unified voice nationally?
Well, certainly with our association with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, with APAS being a member, we've had several discussions with our counterparts from different areas of the country, and they all recognize that this canola issue is certainly a Western issue, particularly because this is where we grow the canola, and they're very sympathetic to our situation here. In terms of the interprovincial barriers, obviously there's different industries in the east part of the country that are very dependent on the U.S. market, even more so than we are. So obviously there's a considerable amount of concern there, and there's massive support for reducing those interprovincial barriers, because they recognize that as much as we're affected by canola trade with the United States or China, they too are affected by the potential for tariffs, and that we need that Canada first attitude going forward.
Yeah, okay. Bill, do you want to speak on the interprovincial piece and
Yeah,
doing things better nationally?
I really do. And I agree with everything Bill said, but I'll maybe touch on the interconnectedness between industries, because what is one of the things that we're facing and struggling with in an agriculture sector? It is trade infrastructure, and it's the movement of goods from a landlocked province to tidewaters. And so now, like you say, don't waste a good crisis. We've been talking about Energy East for how long? Now we've got a Quebec government that says you will never build a pipeline across my province. So I'll reflect on a conversation I had in a boardroom in Dubai, not only like 4 weeks ago, with Issa El Guerrer, who imports 1 million metric tons of canola seed every year into the United Arab Emirates for crush for the Middle East and North Africa region. You know what he tells me the most important thing that we need to do in this country? Build a pipeline. Build an oil pipeline so that you get oil off the trains, so that you can move grain by train, so that you can make the most use of your trade infrastructure. So yeah, interprovincial trade, as Bill is true, but we have to think about this and take a step back around the whole economy and think about the interconnectedness of all of our industries. And so labor mobility is important, trucking regulations are important, but I mean, energy movement is critical, and the impact that it has on us as moving, 35 million metric tons of commodities out of this province is really critical.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about over the course of the show here and listening to a lot of the discussions that have gone on is, what is the proper role of government in this space? And Bill, you certainly talked a lot about research and development and the role that government is playing in certainly spurring some of the innovation. As we've seen, the stacking of some of the federal regulations, I'll use an example of the capital gains, has driven venture capital out of the country and private equity, which is really important from the perspective of tech and innovation. Universities and institutions like the Global Institute for Food Security or even PIC have been doing good work in this area. Can you just maybe speak a little bit about what levers there are to pull on the innovation side and what the proper role of government is there?
Yeah, because I think that's really a role that we've stepped into as a provincial government, with $37 million invested into research and development on an annual basis. And one of the ways we look at research and innovation is not only to support farmers to be more productive and be more competitive, but also to protect things like crop insurance premiums, like investments that we make in research and development, create more resiliency, try to safeguard production at the producer level, and building on those innovations stabilizes yield, which stabilizes business risk management, which allows us to do other things in investments across that area. It's just such a critical element, and so we invest in projects, we invest in people, we invest in research institutions, and I don't foresee that changing, because it's been the foundation of the agriculture sector for a long time. And I think I said it in my opening comments, you're seeing it here at Canada's Farm Show, the level of innovation. And we're very fortunate in this province to not only have the investments that we're making as a provincial government and working with the University of Saskatchewan, but innovative companies and innovative producers. And it's the combination of that entire innovation ecosystem, I think, that's driving productivity and competitiveness for the sector.
Yeah, and Bill, are you hearing from your members, the importance of some of the technology and tools that they're using in terms of managing some of their input costs and those sorts of things? How important is it to producers when we're looking at, precision spraying and seeding, for example? I'm seeing how the drones have evolved throughout the show. Can you maybe speak to some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. That producers, I think, take a great deal of pride in the fact that they are world leaders in adopting technologies like the precision seeding, the fertility issues that we're being able to address by the use of this type of technology, the sprayers, the drones, the combine technology, the satellite technology that we use in our equipment. And I think producers, we've recognized that, I think, for a lot of years that we're doing things right. We know that we're, I dare to say, decades ahead of other areas, even in Canada, in terms of adopting this technology that is it's good for the environment. We're not over, that we're not over fertilizing, we're not over spraying, we're not, we're putting back into the soil the things that our soil needs for the plants to grow. So, I think Bill mentioned the Global Institute for Food Security and the study that they did on the carbon footprint that Saskatchewan producers are compared to other jurisdictions, and the fact that we're doing things right here. We have a good story to tell. Our carbon footprint is significantly less than any other jurisdiction in the world, and that's a good story to tell. I think as producers, we've known that for a long time, but we haven't really had the opportunity or the avenue to express that. I think it's important to recognize that as producers, we've been doing these things. It's been good for the environment. It's been good for the economy, but it's been good for our bottom line. And we've been doing it because we know it's good for what we're doing, not because somebody in the government is saying that this is what you have to do. We're doing it because it makes sense.
Yeah. Labor challenges are one of the top concerns that we hear across all industries. Agriculture is not immune to that. What are you hearing from your members, Bill, in terms of farm succession planning, labor and productivity challenges? And I'm concerned that as President Trump is saying, hey, come and reshore all your operations here, we're going to have a zero tax environment, I'm worried that problem is going to become more acute. What's top of mind for your members?
The access to skilled labor has been an issue for, as long as I've been attending farm meetings. Pretty much every meeting you go to, it comes up at some point. So, certainly it's, in Saskatchewan, maybe not as big of an issue as in other areas that depend on a lot of manual labor. What we're looking for the most part in Saskatchewan farms are skilled laborers that are going to be able to take the technology that you see here and being able to understand how it works and operate it on the farms. And it becomes a bit of a challenge too when you think that that's $1 million or $2 million worth of equipment that's going up and down the field, and just having somebody in there just to fill the tractor seat is not going to solve the situation. Yeah. So we need skilled laborers. We need people that understand the technology that's in these equipment, and it's something that needs to be addressed, because we can't. We have very short windows of working opportunity. In the spring, we've only got maybe 6 weeks to get our crop in the ground, and then 6 weeks in the fall to get it off. So it becomes a time crunch. Labor is certainly an issue, but the labor has to fit the technology that we're working with today as well.
Bill, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll agree with everything Bill's saying. I had something else rolling around in my head on the labor front, and it is related to temporary foreign worker programming. And, I get it. I get it why we needed to rethink immigration policy in the country. We're challenged with the infrastructure that we have to make Canada a great place for new Canadians, and we needed to rethink that. But I'm struck by the juxtaposition between the talk we're having in this country about reducing regulation and being more competitiveness. And so I would encourage everyone to read the 7 different policy and position papers that are being tabled by the federal government about regulating temporary foreign workers and the prescription that they're having on the regulations for people. So now if you're a producer in Saskatchewan that has temporary foreign workers, just on housing alone, the amount of prescriptive regulations that are going to be put in place, it's going to make it very, very difficult and challenging for agribusinesses in this country to access temporary foreign workers. And again, I started my comments with the preface of, I know that we needed to rethink all of these policies, but I'm not sure that temporary foreign workers in the agriculture sector were ever the issue. And now we're going to be collateral damage with changing federal policies and all the regulations that are coming in. And I don't think I'm standing up here saying that temporary foreign workers shouldn't have good housing and not good rates. But the way the federal government is going around prescribing exactly what needs to be done, I would encourage people to read that because it's really insightful in terms of how the federal government is looking at a talk on one hand about reducing regulation and then just going completely the other way in other areas.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue, and you teed me up well. So we may have a refreshed federal government, however that iteration looks, very shortly here. Hopefully it will be called in the next little bit because we certainly do need a mandate. Both of you are in positions to advocate on behalf of the industry. What is it that you would want any prospective federal government to hear that they need to do differently or they need to do in order to protect our industries? Bill, I'm going to start with you.
Well, there's an immediate issue, which is to make trade with China a priority.
Yeah.
Because that's not being dealt with. And, you know, if you listen to Evan Bray this week, you heard the Minister of Agriculture be very clear that that needs to be a priority. And, you know, his opinion was he should have picked up the phone and talked to President Xi instead of going to have tea with the king, right?
Yep.
So I think that's an immediate priority that, that my minister has identified for the new federal government. I think in a broader perspective, one of the things that I'll be looking for and one of the things that I would like to see, regardless of who forms the next government with a new mandate, is a recognition that agriculture is a growth industry for this country.
Yes.
And for those of you who don't know me, I spent like the last 6 years working for a federally funded innovation fund, managing a federally funded innovation fund around value-added agriculture and plant-based food. The lack of understanding and recognition in Ottawa about the potential that agriculture provides for this country to knock on all the doors that this federal government, the current federal government wants to knock on, which is job creation, improvements in productivity, good for the environment, you know, good high-paying, mortgage-paying jobs, right? It ticks every box, but zero recognition. I shouldn't say zero recognition. It's a fight to get recognition at the federal level. Meanwhile, you know, I could go on a rant. I'll stop. But I think recognition at the federal government that this is a growth industry and needs to be supported at the federal level is really, really critical.
Well, I think, you know, and you've spoken to some of it, but the stacking of regulations that make it so difficult and the prescriptive nature of some of those regulations, which make them completely defunct to begin with from an intention perspective, some of the discussions that we've had around access to ports and, you know, we've had the Port of Vancouver strike, and we've had this, and just the slowness of response to some of those things. They all really need to change. We talked a little bit about, you know, there's been a lot of attention paid to the impact on the lobster industry from the Chinese, and I can say this because I'm not in government right now, but I mean, I don't know about you folks, but I don't often have lobster in my grocery basket, but I do often have products that are made byproducts of canola. And most Canadians do because that's usually the stuff we can afford. So there definitely needs to be some recognition to that. Bill, would you like to respond also to what would you like to see from the federal government?
Well, certainly everything that Bill mentioned is very, very critical, and immediately, obviously, the Chinese issue is something that the federal government needs to address as soon as possible. I think I would add to that, though, you know, we know that there are countries out there that need what we grow in Saskatchewan. We know that we grow some of the best quality products in the world that other countries want. We can grow it. Whatever the world needs, we can grow it. We can, you know, we've proven that we can increase our yields. We can grow better canola. We can grow, you know, different oil profiles within that canola that serve different markets. So whatever the world wants, we can grow it. But how do we get it from our farm onto a ship? That seems to be the real hang-up in terms of infrastructure. You know, Bill mentioned earlier that a pipeline getting the oil off the rail would certainly help in that situation. Port improvements, you know, there's so much of a bottleneck in the port getting our grain off the train and onto a ship. You know, all the ships that are moored off of the Port of Vancouver just waiting to get in to get loaded, and they just sit there for weeks, and we pay that bill as a demurrage because we just can't get the grain from our farm onto that ship fast enough. So all these issues that always seem to back off to the farm gate, and as producers, we end up paying the financial hit whenever there's a strike in the rail industry or at the ports. It's the producers that end up suffering the most. If there is all the demurrage that the ships charge, that all gets backed off into our costs or what we get paid for our products. So it's something that needs to be addressed. Again, it speaks to the marketing of our products around the world. We can increase the markets, and I think the Saskatchewan government has done an excellent job of promoting Saskatchewan throughout the world. But we need to be able to get our products into export position.
I think that's a great way to wrap up our panel, unless you want to have one last thought for our attentive audience.
Yeah, I just I want to support what I heard here, because this idea of trade infrastructure is such
Yes.
a critical piece, and everybody in this room will know Murad Al-Khatib, right? He was on my board at Protein Industries Canada. I've often heard him say, if he was Prime Minister for a day, he would invest $20 billion in trade infrastructure. And that would do more for the country than probably what you could do in 5 years. So I just want to echo what I'm hearing here about the critical nature of investment in trade infrastructure, because at the end of the day, 70% of what we grow has got to make its way to Tidewater.
Yeah. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Audience, would you join me in thanking our distinguished guests?